Good afternoon, ma'am. Good
हाँ जी,
afternoon.
good afternoon, sir.
Welcome to this session and thanks for accepting our invitation for this session.
हाँ जी, हाँ, sure this.
Let me introduce to you the audience and then we can start our session if you are ready. Morning participants, now we are going to start the second session of the fourth day of this faculty development program. In this section, we have Dr. Amandeep Kaur from Central University, Punjab as an expert speaker. So Dr. Amandeep Kaur received BE degree in Electronics and Engineering from Nagpur University, Nagpur in 1996 and ME degree with honors in Computer Science and Engineering from Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Patiala in 2001. And she received PhD degree in Computer Science from Punjab University, Patiala in 2013. He was with Center for Development of Advanced Computing, which is popularly known as CDAC, Mohali in India, a premier research and development institute under the Government of India from 2001 to 2005. From 2005 till 15, he worked as assistant professor with the Department of Computer Science, Punjab University, Patiala. She joined Central University of Punjab in 2015 as an associate professor in computer science and engineering and is currently working as professor from 2018 onward. Her research interest includes speech processing, computer vision, artificial intelligence. She has published more than 50 research papers in various international journals, conferences, readings, and as a book chapter. So now I request Dr. Amandeep Kaur to please address the audience. Over to you.
Thanks for introducing me, sir. Thanks a lot. It's always being special to be a part of this department. So whatever I am today, it's because of Department of Computer Science, Punjabi University. I worked here for 10 years and this department is my mentor department. So whatever I've learned, that is because of this department. And at present, I'm working in Central University of Punjab. And what I learned there, I'm using here and I'm further learning. So I'll start sharing my presentation for today's lecture. I will share my slides. I hope you're getting it. The slides are visible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
So
into presentation.
So medical imaging. My PhD thesis was related to medical imaging. So they always interested me a lot. And so medical imaging using machine learning is our topic for today. So this is my current institute where I'm working, Central University of Punjab. So whenever you visit Bathinda, you all are welcome to this university. So we start with the basic to make the link between medical imaging, AI, and things like that. If we define AI is basically an area of computer science that is concerned with designing intelligent computer systems. So what was the focus of AI? That to exhibit the characteristics we associate with intelligence in human behavior. So there were lots of studies, there were lots of branches in AI. Researchers were exploring different types of techniques and methods to make the machines intelligent. So some of the key areas in AI is knowledge representation, like in symbolic AI first. The most important part was the knowledge base and the inference engine. Which was there. So the human operators or the researchers had to embed their knowledge in some formal language, which could be understood by the computer, and that could be used by the inference mechanism to reason and to give results. So automated problem solving using reasoning and inference. So these kind of concepts of knowledge base, they are used in areas like robotics. Again, that is a sub area of AI. We have machine learning, and some of the other important areas are natural language processing and computer vision. So computer vision, if we see today, that is everywhere and it is widely used, from very simple applications to the most complex areas of complex problems. So a lot many times what we think is there is what is the difference between when I simply talk about AI, I talk about machine learning, and when I talk about deep learning. So artificial intelligence was the first one to originate. That was somewhere in 1950s. And AI represents simulated intelligence in machines. Like we had the Turing test, or we can say if we want the machine to translate from maybe English to Chinese, then we have a lookup table. So the machine is having simulated intelligence. It is acting to be intelligent, but it is not like humans. How do we translate? It is just looking up in the table. It doesn't understand Chinese, but it is able to translate it. So there were different ways of simulating this intelligence. So AI basically, it could be a machine is acting intelligent, or it is able to think intelligently, or it is able to think rationally also. So there were different, you can say, areas. There were 4 branches: thinking, acting, thinking rationally, acting rationally. So many of the machines today they act rationally. So all this came from, you can say, other associated areas like neurocomputing, psychology, sociology. So all these areas, philosophy is very, very important, where people like 2000 years before this time, people like Aristotle give us logic or logical thinking. So AI is a subset of data science, because in this also, even in symbolic AI, what we are encoding first is the knowledge, how to represent the knowledge in a way that the machine can understand and reason with it. So the aim was to build machines which are capable of thinking like humans. So it was a very, very vast area, you can say, where researchers were trying to develop machines which could think like humans, and it was totally interdisciplinary. So machine learning basically originated 10 years after that. So machine learning is the practice of getting machines to make decisions without being programmed. So the focus of AI was to develop intelligent machines. Machine learning was more specific. They wanted that the machines should be automated. They should make their own decisions without being programmed for it, or without any human operator. So in Industry 4.0, we say now we have completely automated systems which can learn from the environment. There are so many sensors that are giving data to the machine learning models. And based on that data, the industry is totally automated. So machine learning's focus is getting the machines to make certain decisions without being programmed. So they are getting that information from the data itself, and based on that, they are making the decisions. So, and in deep learning took another 10 years to develop. So it started with the artificial neural networks. So AI, basically, it has different types, like AI can be symbolic, or it could be connectionistic, like in neural networks. So it came in 1970s. And deep learning is the process where we use artificial neural networks to solve complex problems. So Initially, artificial neural networks could solve many problems, but due to the issue of linear separability, many simple problems could not be solved by using single layer neural network. Then we had multi-layer non-linear neural networks. So as we said, if we keep on adding more hidden layers in between, it can handle a higher level of complexity. So if there are more than around 6 layers in a neural network, then we say it is a deep neural network. It has come from artificial neural network only, but with a large number of layers and their types. The focus of deep learning was to solve complex problems. Machine learning was to help machines to make decisions without being programmed, and AI was to develop intelligent machines. So deep learning is basically, machine learning was a subset of AI and data science. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning because there is also some kind of learning to solve the complex problem. And so it is a subset of AI, data science, and machine learning. So in AI, the aim is to build machines which are capable of thinking like humans. Here, the aim is for the machines to learn through their data so that they can solve some problems. The aim is to build a neural network that can automatically discover patterns for your feature detection. So the focus of AI was, because initially when we were using machine learning techniques for any problem, first of all, from the raw data, we extracted some kind of features which have discriminant properties, and we had feature extraction, feature selection, different techniques, and then we use some kind of a classifier to solve these problems. So, but in neural networks, what we want to do is we give the neural network the raw data, and it is able to discover some patterns from these features. Because sometimes it becomes very challenging in machine learning, which features will be the most suitable features for a specific problem to give good results, good decision making. So this is how it is a very, very vast area. The more you study, the more confused you become sometimes. But these are the broad differences we can see between AI, that is a very, very vast area. Then machine learning is some subset of that. And deep neural networks or deep learning is a subset of machine learning. So this study related to data systems and processes, like we talk about data science. We say AI is also part of data science. So you have a large amount of data, and we have some processes. So the aim is to maintain data sets and find meaning out of those data sets. So data science is all about finding meaning from your data sets. So data scientists use different tools and methods and try to make sense out of random data clusters. So we don't have structured data, we have random data through which they try to make some sense. So machine learning, the basic concepts of this field is to make the machines learn from data. As human beings, they learn from their experience. So all these algorithms, when we try to introduce intelligence in them, we try to make them more robust. So they're inspired by either our brain or their nature inspired. So all these algorithms. So the focus was how human beings learn from their experience. The machines are going to learn from the data they are provided, as that is experience for the machines, what they're getting from the sensors. So it contains a learning models on the basis of which the prediction can be made on the unknown data. So these are some of the frameworks which are there in machine learning. So we that. So inventors have long they have dreamed of creating machines that could think. This desire, as I've said, it dates back to the ancient Greek. So several artificial intelligence projects have sought to hard code knowledge about the world in some formal language. So initially we had symbolic AI. They use some formal languages like Lisp and Prolog to code the knowledge in a knowledge base. And that was made use by the logical inference rules to reason about something. So such approaches are knowledge-based approaches to artificial intelligence. So the difficulties which were faced by systems that were relying on hard-coded knowledge. So one thing was we use like prepositional or predicate logic with this knowledge basis to infer something. But in this case, it was very, very difficult. If your knowledge is not completely specified in your knowledge base, your results maybe won't be that good. And if it is, you can say a rule-based system, if the problem is complex, there will be a large number of rules, and the computational requirement of the system will become very, very high. So it will difficult, symbolic AI won't work for such problems. So AI systems need the ability to acquire their own knowledge by extracting patterns from raw data. So symbolic AI, we had to make the knowledge base. It is going to work on that knowledge base. But it has many limitations, because if that encoded knowledge is not complete, so the system won't work properly. And so we needed AI systems that could acquire their own knowledge, and they could extract the patterns from raw data. So this capability is known as machine learning. So you have labeled data, you have machine learning algorithm, and you have a learned model which can be used for prediction. So there could be different types of learnings in machine learning, like supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement. So we on that. So we come to, there are different types of learning in machine learning algorithms. In this case, we could use supervised learning, unsupervised, semi-supervised, reinforcement learning. So based on our application where we want to use, like in medical imaging, mostly we use classification using supervised learning methods. Right? So if you want to do some kind of prediction, maybe a regression model will be used. If you want to have some kind of association, or clustering, then you will use unsupervised learning. So there are different types of learnings, and they are specific to where you want to use them. So in the machine learning, it shifted the focus from symbolic approaches to AI, in AI to model from statistics and probability. So statistics and probability was used to extract some kind of information from this raw data. So it uses statistical methods to enable machines to improve the experience and learn from there. So now we have the age of big data. So it has made machine learning much easier, because the large amount of data will help you to extract better knowledge, because the key burden on statistical methods or statistical estimation was when we talk about statistical techniques. So what we were taking, we were trying to generalize from a sample data, which is a small amount of data. So now we have big data. So big data will help us to have better models. So in 2016, a rough rule of thumb was that supervised deep learning algorithms will give acceptable performance with around 5,000 labeled examples. So the main requirement for machine learning, you can say, and specifically for deep learning, is that the data size should be large. So according to one approximation, around 5,000 labeled data set will give you good performance for your deep learning algorithms, and will match or exceed human performance when it is trained at around at least 10 million labeled examples. So its accuracy will surpass the human performance when there are at least 10 million labeled examples or more than that. So So one thing is very, very clear, कि if you are using deep learning methods, you need very large size data. When we talk about medical image processing using machine learning techniques, then overlapping concepts are about computer vision. So to achieve capabilities which are similar to the human vision, with the images we use machine learning, and that concept is called computer vision. Is one of the widely researched and practically implemented areas of artificial intelligence. It is used in a wide variety of applications. It has been able to solve or give good results for different medical modalities, different medical, you can say, applications, from diagnosis to automatic surgery, to proper treatment plan. So its goal is to develop capacities similar to human vision. So if we see an example, simple example of machine learning, that is like Siri, which is a popular personal assistant. So it will gather information from your messages, from your calendar, the kind of music you are listening to, reminders, mails, all those things, and then automatically use this using machine learning technology to learn and become smarter. So it will come to know what kind of requirements you have. Using all that information, Siri can understand your commands in a better way. So it can understand your commands and requests very easily. So data is the core of machine learning, you can say. And because of digitization of everything, so large amount of digital data is already available. So if we take the example of computer vision, so like we have Amazon Go, that is a store which is fitted with cameras, specialized with computer vision. So if you go for shopping, you don't need to stop for, you take the grocery, there is no need for billing and everything. Your amount, whatever you purchase, will be auto deducted from your card maybe. So you just go pick up things and come out of the store. So this kind of concepts are given by computer vision. So now we come on medical image analysis specifically. So now when we see, we have large medical data, which is clinical data. We have data from laboratories. We have imaging data, and we have genomic data. Genomic data is something related to your genes, right? So there are many diseases maybe which we inherit genetically, and they are based on our genes. So computers are used in the routine clinical practice today. Medical practitioners, they are using computers these days. They are comfortable with it. So your labs are giving you digital x-rays. Your whole data is digitized. Patient information is stored digitally. So all this information, and maximum your test data is in the form of some kind of image data, some kind of a signal, you can say. So you maybe have MRI, you have CT scans, you have X-rays. So whenever they're not able to diagnose something with initial just seeing the symptoms, they will ask for further tests. Maybe they are your blood test, but mostly they go for serious diseases, they go for CT scans, MRIs, and all those things. So maximum of your data is in the form of imaging. So this may allow radiologists to integrate their knowledge. So radiologists are the people who are seeing these images and inferring something from these images, medical images. So they can combine or integrate their knowledge with their colleagues from other medical specialties, and allow for precision medicine with the help of decision support system. So one application of medical image analysis is the decision support system. And so you have some kind of medical imaging, you have a doctor which has noted some other symptoms. Maybe a person is having some form of cancer that is developed maybe in his part of his body. So these imaging can help us to pinpoint which cells are cancerous cells, and for that precision medicine can be given. So maybe whatever treatment they want to give, chemo or some other radiations, they can specify to that area only. So in this case, you have a patient, he has his electronic health record. So you have this clinical decision support system where data pre-processing is done. So there may be multi-level learning approaches being used with this data to extract something from this data, some knowledge, and accordingly recommend the diagnosis to the expert, or you can say the medical specialist. And so he can make a clinical decision based on these diagnoses and accordingly treat the patient. So when we talk about computer-aided detection in medical imaging, that started, you can say, in 1960s. Maybe they were not based on deep learning models or machine learning, but we had computer-aided detection in medical imaging way back in 1960s, especially for thoracic and breast imaging, where they could diagnose breast cancer and things like that, or your throat part if there are some cancerous tissues there. So during that time, what was done was some kind of features were from the images were pre-processed and some kind of features were extracted, and with those features, they compared it with the normal patients and the diseased person, and accordingly decisions could be made. So the widespread progress in this area for various diseases has only advanced in the past decade. So to a limited extent, some work was initiated, but with the higher computing power, better storage, you can say, digital imaging, with all these, now the same concept of computer-aided diagnosis or therapy or treatment. In other diseases, it is a recent trend, you can say, just past 1 or 2 decades. So now you have increased electronic access to information. So that has helped to further expand this area. So there are lots of benefits of big medical data. Mainly includes electronic health records of patients. Many developed countries, they already have this, and they have large amount of data. That data is helping them for better treatment of their patients. So you have their health records, you have their medical image data, you have their gene information data. So among them, medical image data accounts for vast majority of medical data at this stage. So now the question is how to apply big medical data to clinical practices. So you have large amount of data, how this can be used in clinical processes or practices. Okay? So in your medical imaging, there are many biomarkers which tells you if a person is having some disease or a person is healthy. So if we take the brain MRI, and we can find out if a person has a normal brain structure, or there are some issues due to which, like in children, you see they have autism and they have Down syndrome and they have other problems. So that can be diagnosed through their medical imaging, and previously that was being evaluated by the radiologists, and they were their results were, you can say, I think I've got some message. I'll just check. Okay. So there is a question which is coming already, that can you give few sources from where we can get patients discharge summary data for natural language processing? So when I was trying to get medical data for maybe digital x-rays, though I got the data from some foreign researchers, But when I was going to dental colleges in India, I was told that this is a confidential data of patients. They are not able to share it. But now, like we have COVID data, you can see many researchers, many institutes, many hospitals, they were sharing the patient's X-rays and CT scans of COVID patients, so that from this imaging, it could help the patients in some way, some research could be done. So in the same way, I'm not aware of some data for NLP, the patient record, that has to be collected from the hospitals. But for that, they will get some forms signed that you will keep this data confidential because this is the patient data. And maybe they will won't give you the name and all, but other things will be shared. But only if you have some MOU or something with the medical institute, they will share their data. Okay? So because this data is very sensitive, this data is related to some patients. So it is a little difficult to get this kind of a data. But the way out is ki if you are working in coordination with some doctors or some medical colleges, they share their data, but they will hide the patient names. So now the issue is we have large amount of data, we have big data, and how it can be used, and we can get some good clinical practices out of that can help the doctors in some ways, the patients in some way. So an essential foundation for designing any diagnostic or therapeutic solution using medical imaging, it has to have few of these. These are the essential foundation, you can say. This is the backbone. So this is radiomics, and this is basically techniques that extract large number of features from medical imaging using data characterization algorithms. So data characterization in this case is some kind of summarization of general characteristics or features of the target class of data. So if a person is suffering from some kind of pneumonia, so maybe that pneumonia is bacterial or it is viral. So there will be some changes in the lungs. So first of all, you need to understand how the lungs of a normal person, they differ from a patient who has pneumonia, and maybe he has bacterial or viral pneumonia. They will also differ from each other. Once you understand that, then you have to select a region of interest. And from there, some features have to be extracted, which will differentiate a normal lung from a diseased lung. So there has to be some kind of feature extraction, which is based on data characterization algorithms. So you need to extract features of some target class of data. So you will collect the features for normal lungs, and you will collect the data for persons with pneumonia, and then you will train your model. So that model could be based on machine learning, and in machine learning mostly we focus on deep neural networks in this case. So you need an understanding of artificial neural networks, and you should know the various machine learning and deep learning techniques. So wherever imaging data is concerned, we generally use convolutional neural networks. So obtaining medical image features may involve image segmentation, like tumors from its background, extraction of various tumor features. So once you are able to segment, you could segment your foreground or the area region of your interest from the background. You're not interested in the background, you are interested in some specific area in that image, and you extract the features from there. So the ultimate benefit of this quantitative radiomics is to yield predictive image-based phenotypes. So that is the physical properties which you can see of disease for precision medicine. So a radiographer will see maybe the CT scan of lungs, and he will come to know he's seeing some kind of features there, and from there that features he can say that this person is maybe having pneumonia, and yield quantitative image-based phenotypes for imaging genomics. So now, even this is new for me. I haven't worked in this area, but this looks to be very, very interesting. So there are many tumors which are related to our genes. So you find the physical features from the medical images and you relate it with the genetic data. And you are able to relate ki if in your imaging, in your lungs, you are getting this kind of features, these are related in this way to the genomics. So imaging genomics is an emerging field, an application area in which your macroscopic phenotypes, macroscopic means which you can see physically from medical imaging, how they are linked with the molecular phenotypes. So some features which are coming from your genetic information. So radiomic features can be described as handcrafted or engineered, or they can be features which are learned from the deep learning models. So either the features are handcrafted, that means you will use the basic image processing techniques like segmentation and then feature extraction, or you can extract the features. You don't need to extract the features. That means the deep learning model is going to extract the features on its own. So when we talk about medical imaging, we can say that there are different types of medical imaging. So we have X-ray images. They have their own properties. They have their own settings, the machines, and they have their own kind of distortions which are added to the X-rays. The biggest problem in X-rays, normal X-rays, is that the contrast is sometimes low. So to protect the patient from harmful radiation, maybe the settings are set in that ways for current and voltage that it won't harm the patient. And sometimes due to that, the contrast of X-rays is quite low. So like ultrasound, that is from sound waves. So its sources could be different. These images could be in the electromagnetic spectrum, could be used as a source of energy for capturing these images, or it could be some other source, like in ultrasounds, we have sound waves. We have CT scans, we have MRIs, we have PET scans, and so on. So they enable the radiologists to look inside into the complex body parts, which are located in the interior of the human body. And different image modalities, they will provide highly complementary information. So sometimes, many times we see it in medical image area where we are fusing MRI images with CT scan images, right? Because they are carrying complementary information. One is carrying one kind of information, another is carrying another kind of information, and they both are important. So you fuse them together to get the complete information sometimes, right? Now, if you're using CT scan and MRI, CT scan is like your X-rays, but it is 3D. MRI is using some kind of a magnetic field, and they suffer from some kind of noises due to their hardware and things like that. So you need to pre-process these images sometimes. So they give you the internal anatomical information about your body, and they give the precise location but cannot provide functional information. So CT scans, MRIs are used to localize some information, like you want to find out the location of the tumor or things like that. But they won't give you any functional information about your body. For that, the PET scans and the, you can say, a single photon emission computed tomography techniques like this are used. So these images gives you the functional information that is required for detecting metabolic abnormalities, but it cannot provide you the anatomical details and the precise location. So they are based on some kind of nuclear medicine procedures like single photon emission computed tomography. This scan is an imaging test that shows how blood flows to your tissues and organs. So if there is some blockage or something, that can be found out. So different medical imaging have different uses. So when we normally see the medical images and other images also, which are complex in nature, image interpretation by humans is limited by the presence of structural noise. I said sometimes some features are masked and we are not able to differentiate them very clearly with the naked eye. The results could be subjective from expert to expert, maybe the level of exertion of that expert, or how many what is his work schedule, and so many things which affect human. So based on the experience, and so their results will be subjective from expert to expert, right? They may vary, and they are time intensive also. The human expert will have to spend the time to analyze these images. So machine learning plays an important role in medical imaging field, including analysis and computer-aided diagnosis. So generally we use it as objects to find out objects like lesions and organs. So we can't represent these lesions and organs by some simple mathematical models. So medical pattern recognition essentially requires learning from examples. So there is so much of variations. A person, two people, both are suffering from some kind of a cancer, but how it is affecting the organs won't be exactly same. It will have lots of variations. So you can't just develop some common mathematical model to describe those lesions, but you need something which is learning from examples. So if you give a machine learning algorithm, you use a large number of patient images so that it is able to capture all the variabilities in these images. It will give you better results. So there are various machine learning traditional techniques, how they worked. You had to segment the image, find the features, and give this features set. You have to develop a training data set with your input features and the desired output which is there. And accordingly, you trained your machine learning classifiers like support vector machines, decision trees, and so on. So one of the most popular uses of machine learning in medical imaging is classification of objects. You classify the lesions as normal, abnormal, or you tumorous or non-tumorous based on the input features from region of interest. But the challenges which were there in this was it is very, very difficult because your images are very complex. As I've said, they will have some kind of, you need to pre-process them, maybe to improve their contrast, reduce the noise and things like that. And when you do it in medical imaging, you don't want, if you pre-process your images, they should not lose any important information in your image. So what happens sometimes is, along with the noise, some required information is also lost from your image when you're pre-processing it. So especially in medical imaging, their focus is to work on pixel machine learning. So pixel machine learning is where you don't find out the features, but you directly give the pixels, image details to your machine learning model without any feature calculation or segmentation, and that is used for classification. And from this only the deep learning neural networks, they emerged, right? This requirement. Because this pixel-based machine learning can avoid errors which are caused by inaccurate feature calculation. So like we used to work on feature extraction. So for each application, we had to decide which kind of features are going to perform better than the other features. There are so many types of image features which can be used for classification. And there were feature calculation errors, there were segmentation errors. And due to that, the classification was not proper. Specifically for complex objects. So the performance of pixel machine learning can potentially be higher for such objects that are very complex than that of common classifiers, which are feature-based machine learning. So when we see the literature, there are 3 types of pixel machine learning methods like neural filters, convolutional neural networks, massively trained Artificial neural networks. And out of these, convolutional neural networks are widely used for general classification. And so neural filters, maybe they are used as edge enhancers or something like that. I hadn't gone into the details. So from here we come to know that when we talk about medical images, in a traditional machine learning method, we did some kind of segmentation to find region of interest or separate the background from the region of interest or foreground. Then we extract features from that area. Then maybe in those features, we have some noise, which are not useful features. We need to do the feature selection and discard the noise, and then use some kind of a classifier to classify it. And that will give you the detection or the decision results. Right? So it will depend on the medical imaging for which you are using. But when you use pixel-based machine learning or deep learning approaches, you just give the input medical image directly to this deep learning model. It will do all this for you. So it is an end-to-end classifier, we say, like convolutional neural network. So you give the input image, it is going to find the features, and it is going to do the classification and give you the output. So this is the difference between how a non-pixel machine learning methods work. So among all the deep learning methods, the convolutional neural networks are of special interest. The reason for this is that by exploiting local connectivity of patterns efficiently with shared weights, we can, it has quickly become a state-of-art method for image processing. So what it is doing, it is able to find the patterns from your raw data with some shared weights, because when you talk about deep learning models, you're also concerned the more parameters will you have, hyperparameters, the more layers you have, the network will become very complex and it will need higher computational resources. So deep learning, as we had seen, is basically a machine learning in which multiple layer networks are used to assess complex patterns within the raw imaging data. So that is being conducted by a convolutional neural network. So current boom, it started in 2009, and there were some competitions which were organized to see how good these models are. And if we see, so this is the same concept that you want to localize the tumor and you don't need to extract these features. This everything is done by the convolutional neural networks. So the classification and feature extraction, they're embedded here only. So in machine learning in general, what you had to do, you had to select features, extract features that a computer can understand, and that can be used for learning. So these features were domain specific. So input, feature extraction, classification, output, fine. Deep learning is everything is together. So this is not separate. You don't have to decide which kind of features you have to use. Deep learning model is going to use it. So if in brief, we see the history. So it all started with AlexNet in 2012, and there was some kind of a competition with which it won. This paper is cited more than, you can say, nearly 12,000 times, according to Google Scholar. So it has given a drastic improvement in learning. So this is how the work on CNN was initiated. So like we say, the deep learning, the concepts move from simple concepts to difficult concepts. So it was deep learning allows computational models that are composed of multiple processing layers to learn representations of data with multiple levels of abstraction. So they will find low level features. Using these features, they will make the high level features, and using these features, they will give you higher level of features. So there is some kind of feature abstraction here. So deep learning, it allows the computer to build complex concept out of simpler concepts. So we will see that. So the performance of these simple machine learning algorithms depends heavily on the representation of data they are given. Right? So traditional machine learning, what it is doing is that it is solely dependent on how you represent your data. If your feature, you select good features, you are able to extract the features properly and then give it to the classifier, it will give you good results. But this choice of representation has an enormous effect on the performance of machine learning. So many artificial intelligence tasks can be solved by designing the right set of features to extract for that task and then provide it to the machine learning algorithm. But if we are not able to give the proper representation of our data, then the classification results will not be good. So for many tasks, it is difficult to know what features should be extracted. Like we were trying to work on X-rays of COVID patients, because even in their lungs, they have some kind of a pneumonia kind of a symptoms. So we wanted to differentiate how a person who is suffering from bacterial pneumonia or some other form of pneumonia, their lungs are different from the COVID patients. If you visually see them, you don't have many biomarkers which can separate them. So you are not sure what kind of features to extract to differentiate these kind of lung images. So, but if you directly use these images and you give it to a model like CNN and you train it, we were surprised to see that we got quite good results. Right? That was in very initial stages of COVID. Somehow that publication is in between. After that, many publications came related to X-rays, because many times we see a better option is CT scan that gives higher accuracy, but CT scans are costly. That equipment is also costly. People don't have easy access, but X-rays can be easily done using handheld, or you can say mobile X-ray machines. They are more cost effective. So if we can differentiate something from for a COVID patient, which can tell us if this X-ray is for this COVID patient and to what extent his lungs are affected. So some papers are already coming on that. So sometimes it becomes difficult to extract features for this complex task. So a major source of difficulty in many real-world AI applications is that Any of the factors of variation, they influence every single piece of data we are able to absorb. So if there is a slight variation in any setting, anything, that is going to affect your whole data. Right? So it can be very difficult to extract such high-level abstract features from raw data for us. So deep learning solves this central problem in representation learning by introducing representations that are expressed in terms of other simpler representation. So deep learning models solve this problem for us. So we can just give the raw images to our model, but now we will have to decide the kind of architecture our model has, how many layers it has, what kind of activation function we will use. There are a lot of other hyperparameters which need to be adjusted to get good results. And you need good machines to work on. So deep learning rose to its prominent position in computer vision when neural networks started outperforming other methods. So all these things are interrelated. So in computer vision, first we were using other traditional image processing techniques, other traditional classifiers to solve the machine medical problems, to find solutions to them. And when the neural network started outperforming other methods for several high-profile image analysis benchmarks, then we realized that this deep learning methods using computer vision can be a very good tool, you can say, for medical image analysis. So there are different competitions like ImageNet Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge that was in 2012, and convolutional neural networks gave very good results in them. So that enabling computers to recognize objects in natural images. So you have Coral data set, but like in that they had taken the images of food, or they have taken the images of animals, or they have taken the images of cars, but they are very standardized. So you can just see one car in that image. But when you have a natural image in which maybe there are trees, there are roads, there are other things, and there is some object of interest, so it's very difficult to recognize those objects. Then object recognition was a challenging problem in pattern recognition in case of natural images. So CNN gave very good results to this. And there were different competitions every year. There were some competitions, and the last was held in 2017. So the computer vision research has moved on to other more difficult benchmark challenges, like we have common objects in context challenge. I haven't seen what kind of images they have in this, but these kind of benchmark data sets are there, which where you can test your model's performance. So if you propose a model in future, you make some changes through CNN and you say my model is performing in better way in some ways. So you need to test it on such standard benchmark data sets. So deep learning in the field of biomedical area is still in its infancy. Still lots of work needs to be done. A lot of work has been done, but much of work is pending also. It needs further improvement. But there are several strong initiatives by researchers from academics and industry both. They are pursuing this in healthcare projects based on machine learning. So you can go on the page for Google Brain or DeepMind. You will come to know what kind of work they are doing in medical imaging using machine learning. So lots of funds are invested in this area because it holds a lot of promise. If the accuracy of you can say tumor detection is improved, that can lead to better kind of medication, precision medicines, and that can help the patients to have lesser side effects. So so many things are interlinked. So a lot of work is being done in this area. As I've said, this was the first paper. AlexNet was there. It has a number of 7 or 8 hidden layers, total layers with some hidden layers. So first we had AlexNet, then we had network in network structure that improved in the case of overfitting. In 2014, Google LeNet was there, VGGNet with 16 layers or with more layers, it is there. They both improved the accuracy of ImageNet dataset. So these were some of the base papers, base techniques which are used in deep neural networks. So the initial CNN, they had some shortcoming. Input size was fixed in them. Then spatial pyramid pooling was proposed that has robustness on the input data size. And with the deepening of deep learning models, again he et al. This researcher, he proposed a residual network, ResNet, for the problem of model degradation that may occur and continue to advance the deep learning technology. So different researchers are working, they are proposing their models, they are improving the limitations of existing models. Since CNN success in classification field, people started trying CNN for segmentation also. So we won't focus on this segmentation part. So the earliest journal publication of CNN in medical imaging was in 1994 and was for the computerized detection of microcalcification in mammography. So lots of work has been done in breast cancer. So this is one of the oldest researched area. So this cancer kills so many women every year. So a lot of work has been done in this. So like I've said, it gives you, so this, it starts with simple features. You have input, you have edges, you have corners and contours from edges, you have object parts, and then the complete object. So from simple features to complex features, this is how CNN works. So there will be a visible layer and there will be some hidden layers. So these hidden layers, they extract some abstract features from the image. So first layer will extract some basic simple features like edges. The first hidden layer then will extract maybe corners and contours from these edges. And the next hidden layer is going to find out from these contours and corners some object parts. And then the next layer will give you the complete object parts. What we see here, now the focus is on data. So through data, they are improving the experience. They are learning and they are working in a better way. These are dynamic models, we can say. As new data is coming, they can be trained from there. So deep learning, as we had seen, achieves great power and flexibility by learning to represent the world as a nested hierarchy of concepts, from simple to difficult, from less abstract to more abstract. So in deep learning, the computers, they learn useful representations and features automatically from the raw data and by bypassing this manual and difficult step. So when we talk about deep learning, the common variants in this case are different types of artificial neural networks. There are some other deep learning methods also, but artificial neural networks are the commonest used deep learning models. So the focus of all these deep learning techniques is on feature learning. So now we know that a large amount of data is available, and the hardware and software has improved. So that has helped to improve the accuracy over time for these deep learning neural network models. So another reason for this to be successful is that the computational resources. Now we have GPU based systems which can help us in computing in a faster way. So since the introduction of hidden layers, the artificial neural networks have doubled in size roughly every 2.4 years. So first we had single layer neural networks, they had their own issues. Then multi-layer neural networks with one hidden layer, a few hidden layers, and that hidden units are increasing. That means they are doubling every 2.4 years. This growth is driven by faster computers with large memory and the availability of large data sets. So we can say that we can handle more complex problems by adding more number of hidden layers. That increases the non-linearity in your neural network. Now the issue comes, like we were seeing or we were discussing, was that in many problem areas in medical imaging, we don't get very large data sets. So like I was seeing in certain cases, like COVID was a very, very rare thing to happen, and the researchers were trying their best to do something regarding this. So I had seen the institutes, they were sharing their COVID X-rays, COVID CT scans on GitHub. A large number of researchers were sharing their data sets, and what it helped in a short time, it helped to create a data set. But it normally doesn't happen. As I've said, patient record is confidential. So where there are medical institutes where they are doing active research using AI in medical image analysis, and their medical institutes, they have their own data sets and they are testing on that. But the main issue is the size of the data set. As I've said, if we have more than 10 million samples in a data set, it will bypass the human, right? But that means we need a large data set. So that is one issue when we are taking up any problem using deep neural networks. So some researchers, they have suggested the concept of transfer learning. So now we don't use a model from scratch. What we do is we use a model which is pre-trained. So many developments have been published demonstrating the role of transfer learning in radiology. So basically, training CNNs from scratch is often not possible for the computer-aided diagnosis because we don't have that size of the data and other medical interpretation tasks. So, however, generic features can be transferred from an already trained CNN. So we have already trained CNN, and the generic features can be transformed from there for a specific kind of a problem, where the CNN model is pre-trained using natural scenes to serve as features for input to classifiers that are focusing on medical imaging. So what they do is they have a CNN, they have a large data set of natural images. So they will train the CNN model on these natural images. So this trained model with having some generic features which are stored in its weights, this can be used for further retraining with the limited medical data set, and that can be used as a model for, it can be used in computer-aided diagnosis, in CAD or in some other diagnosis or detection problem in medical imaging. So as I've said, for training CNNs require very large and correctly labeled data sets, and as well as substantial amount of computational resources. So if your data size is very, very large, that means you need large amount of data storage. You need high computational power to train these models from scratch. Thus, implementation of deep learning in medical decision making is occurring through the use of pre-trained CNNs. So whenever we are also testing, we are taking a pre-trained CNN, we are adjusting its hyperparameters. Maybe we are changing its fine-tuning its layers, or we are changing the activation functions and seeing how it improves the accuracy. So either with or without fine-tuning, we can use them on our data set and we can train and use them. So this process is known as transfer learning. For example, the use of off-the-shelf CNNs pre-trained on everyday objects can be used to characterize tumors, transferring knowledge from general object recognition tasks to medical imaging. मेरी 1:30 बजे तक है, हाँ बस नहीं, half an hour. These methods allow for harnessing the predictive power of deep neural networks without the need for extremely large data sets or computational cost requirements. So there are other ways also of data argumentation, like you have a single image, you will apply some geometric transformations on that, and from that single images, maybe you will create 10 images for your data set. So data argumentation is there, transfer learning is there to overcome this problem of large size of data set which is required for medical imaging. So now when we are implementing it, we want to, so this is also one of the reasons why very fast research is going on using deep neural networks is there. We have better computational resources, we have some standard data sets also, we have pre-trained models which are shared with us by the researchers, and we have good frameworks, many of them open source, which are given to us. And even if we don't understand the complete architecture of the CNN, but we know there are so many layers, these are the kernels, and this is how I can use this model. Then these frameworks have made it very easy to use these CNN models. So the many people from other areas, not even computer science, they are able to use these deep learning models for their problem domains, like in finance, in food science, in bioinformatics, and so many other areas. So convolutional architecture for fast feature embedding is one of them that is given by Berkeley, California. So this is, it has features like high performance and seamless switching between CPU and GPU modes. So there are two modes in which we can work. Like if I'm working on my desktop, I will work in the CPU mode. But if I have a workstation with the GPU, then I will shift to the GPU mode. And it is cross-platform support. It works in Windows, Linux, and Mac. It has some atomic structures like bulbs, and we have layers and nets. So this can be understood when we can go through some tutorials. So I haven't used this framework, but otherwise it is good. So it highly abstracts the structure of deep neural network in terms of layers, and it significantly optimizes the execution efficiency, because that is very, very important. We want the models to train faster. So they have some elaborate design to do that, and they have an efficient implementation. TensorFlow is another open source software library that uses data flow diagrams for numerical calculations. So Google, it is given by Google. It came opened officially in 15, and it was officially released as Google TensorFlow version 1 in 17. After that, I think 4 versions are more. So marking its official use in the production environment. So TensorFlow, it supports deep learning models like CNN and recurrent neural networks. This is also an open source. And PyTorch, Python, is the Python version of Torch, a neural network framework that is open source by Facebook and specially targeted at GPU accelerated deep neural network programming, though it works in CPU also, but it is targeted towards the GPU. So when we know whenever we want to use deep neural networks, so what are the challenges in medical image analysis is that sometimes in similar kind of diseases, the changes in their medical imaging is very, very subtle. That means there is not much difference that we can visually see. I was taking the example of COVID X-rays. So if you see the COVID X-rays and a X-ray of a normal pneumonia patient, and they look similar to us with some distortions. So we don't have any biomarkers to pinpoint. Look, if this part is like this, then this is for normal pneumonia and this is for COVID. So some changes are very, very fine, which we are not able to differentiate. Second biggest challenge is need for large annotated clinical data set. So even if we take the medical imaging, so even if we go to some hospital, we request some doctor to share the MRIs, but will they annotate those for us? Then we need it. This is of a normal patient, EAGA. So any other related data also we wanted to with this. And then you have complex structure of many machine learning methods. And we need sufficient harmonization. That means is necessary for clinical translation in terms of reproducibility and repeatability. Sometimes we train a model and we say, I have this data set and it is giving me this much of accuracy. But when it is used on the real data set, actual data set from the hospitals, this trained model doesn't perform as suggested. So we have to, because this is a very, very critical area, it matters because the safety of the patient, the health of the patient. So if the diagnosis has little variation, it can harm the patient. So that is very, very important when we are working with medical images, that reproducibility and repeatability is very, very important. So sometimes there are inconsistencies in the data formats, and we have lack of reliable training data. So if it is not annotated properly, maybe I have some diseased imaging, but that are marked as normal. So if the data set is not correct, so whatever kind of data we are going to give the model, accordingly it is going to train. And accordingly, maybe it will misclassify if the data is not reliable. So the transfer of human knowledge to a machine learning model is also a challenge, like in some of the symbolic AI models. So this signifies that much is needed for continued research and development before full clinical incorporation and use. Because we can propose a model in the paper, we can test it on a limited data set. Initial results are good, but before it is actually used clinically, it has to be checked in a very rugged way. So when we are very, very sure that our model gives us a high accuracy of results, only then we can use it with the patients, because otherwise it can create problems. So now I have seen like even we were working on some basic brain classification, brain tumors, or maybe prostate cancer or some other kind of a cancer, just for classification. But if we can relate, so many diseases are, as I've said, they are genetically related. So if we can integrate the imaging with the genomic features and lead to a higher power of prediction. Okay, so I don't know how they do it, but even our science students, sometimes they take up blood samples and they say, we are studying something. If you're allergic, maybe there is something in your genes, in the coding of your genes, from where we'll come to know maybe this is genetically related. So they'll do some blood tests. So if we can relate this imaging with the genetical data, it holds a lot of promise. Another thing is, many times we listen, there are different kinds of cancers, and they do the biopsy. They take a small piece from their body and they will test if it is cancerous in nature, if it is cancerous, it is malignant or non-malignant. But sometimes what happens is that the tumor is not malignant, and when the biopsy is done, we just irritate it, you can say. So sometimes the cancer starts spreading very fast after that, and that is painful, that is invasive in nature, because you go inside the body and you take a small piece of part of that, your skin. So can virtual digital biopsy is possible from the imaging itself, because that will be very, very helpful, as it is non-invasive in nature. And can this virtual digital biopsy give us the knowledge, complete knowledge about the kind of tumor it is? And because that will be much easier to repeat. And these are some of the areas. The other areas are like we have telemedicine. That is a very, very old concept now, but that is quite relevant when we talk about COVID. Now, many of the OPDs went online, even AIIMS and other institutes, where doctors were in touch with us in digital mode. We could tell our symptoms and they prescribed the medicines. And they were overworked also. They had to see to the COVID patients also and things like that. So if we can develop deep learning models based on multiple type of data, including imaging, other symptoms, some laboratory tests, and it can prescribe some medicines, decision support system, or it can help if the disease is very, very complex. So multiple specialists may give multiple inputs, and from there, if a good decision could be made. So virtually there are a lot of areas in which a lot of research is required. And the best part of this machine learning in medical image analysis is that it is non-invasive. In the same way, like hypertension is a very, very common problem. And generally a person doesn't come to know because they don't have any symptoms, but their BP is continuously high and it creates problem for them in future. So like if we have our eye images, your fundus images, which gives you the images of vessels in your eyeballs. And from these vessels, you can find out if the person is suffering from hypertension or not. So there are so many non-invasive techniques which are being used by different patients. We have many diseases in the old age. On that, quite a few research papers are there on brain MRIs, where they compute how the structure of brain has changed. In some people, they have memory loss or things like that. So this is a very, very vast area, and we have just started. So the main challenge is the data set. So if we get good annotated data sets, so there are, like I've said, key alternatives are transfer learning, data augmentation techniques, and so on, which are used and explored, how they can help us to work with limited data set. So there are many open research areas in this. So it has been long known that artificial neural networks are very flexible and they're able to model and solve complicated problems, but also that they are difficult and very computationally expensive to train. So this has lowered their practical utility previously and led people to, until recently, focus on other machine learning models because they are simpler, they are less computationally expensive, but we have to extract or represent, give the representation ourselves, find out some features, give it to the classifier, and it is going to train. But by now, artificial neural networks form one of the dominant methods in machine learning, and that is most intensively studied. This change basically is thanks to the growth of big data. So now, the creation of a large amount of data, powerful processors which have parallel computational capabilities with GPUs, improvement in algorithms used to construct and train the networks, and the development of easy to use software frameworks. It has all helped to in the progress of this area. And now you can say everywhere artificial neural networks are used. I must say, if I have 31 departments in my university, each department can use AI in a number of ways. So maybe it is journalism and mass communication, maybe any of department like fake news detection. In food processing, we are saying if we want to see the maturity of foods or things like that. In law, so the AI model can be trained on the previous judgments given in similar cases. And so there can be AI-based judge. So you give the inputs and that they will give the model is going to give the decisions. But all of this depends on the data. If your data is biased, the results will be biased. Okay? So if you're not training it with the correct data, it is going to give you incorrect results. So now everything is dependent how accurate, how good your data is. So the creation of data sets is a very, very important area in any of the fields to use artificial neural network techniques. So I think it was quite a lot. You all had to listen patiently for more than 1 hour. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. These are some of the research papers through which I just went to get some inputs regarding this topic. So I will stop sharing it. And if you have any question, you can ask.
Ma'am, thank you very much. Yes,
Haan ji.
audience, if
Haan
you have
ji.
any question, doubt or question, you can ask. Okay, ma'am, thank you. Thank you very much for explaining the use of deep neural network in medical imaging. The field is so vast and full of opportunities. And thank you for providing the pointer to this area. Now our participants have idea and they can explore more by their own. So thank you very much once again for this session. Thank you.